Our first speaker is Ian Williamson. He's the president of the European Hydrogen Association, and he runs an energy consulting business in the UK and acting as a business development director for companies finding their initial business in Europe and the UK. High Energy brings sector expertise to bear in various EU-funded projects such as SheFuel and GenCom, and helps prepare proposals for consortia such as the first ever Hydrogen Valley project funded by the Fuel Cells Hydrogen Joint Initiative, the Heaven project. The company has expanded its operations in the Netherlands last year. Ian has over 30 years' experience in natural gases, primarily in the hydrogen energy sector, and having worked for Air Products. He is also CEO and has been one of the few British fuel cell companies, AFC Energy. He has a wide-ranging hydrogen supply and application expertise. Finally, he has been president of the European Hydrogen Association for the last 10 years. As I said, Ian is one of our key speakers, or one of our key partners in the GenCom project. And Ian, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Morning, everyone. Thank you very much to Belfast Met for giving us the opportunity to speak today. I just want to take you, Paul gave us a very broad topic, hydrogen futures. So I'm going to try and narrow that down a little bit and talk about one particular hydrogen future that we see beginning to manifest itself already in Europe. So what we're going to try and focus on a little bit is around hydrogen going into ports, and to talk around why we think that is important. And then we're going to focus a little bit further down on what's happening in Rotterdam. So let's look at greenness, and Paul has covered really the current industrial phase where we all use natural gas to get to our hydrogen molecule. But we do see electrolysis coming forward within Europe, beginning to scale up, beginning to get to size ranges that do offer both governments and industry alternatives to that historical fossil-based production method. We see companies like my old company, Air Products, beginning to look at significant scaled electrolysis in different parts of the world. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the application of those molecules will occur in those parts of the world. They just think it is effectively a positive business model to use the natural resources that maybe countries like Saudi Arabia and other countries in the Middle East have to produce the hydrogen, and then to move the hydrogen around the world. Closer to home, we still have the North Sea acting as a significant energy generator for the whole of Europe. So, okay, today it's fossil. We're taking natural gas and oil out of the North Sea, but what companies and utility companies are beginning to look at is how that capability of the North Sea can be transitioned through to renewable sources. So let's have a look at ports. So we've already said that companies are investigating renewables on a global basis. So how do they move those renewables around the world? Well, we believe that that is going to occur in the form of hydrogen. And if it's not directly as hydrogen, it could be as hydrogen carrier molecules. And therefore, bringing ports into that equation at an early stage of the development of this technology and energy transition is a very appropriate thing to do. We also see, obviously, that ports, given the fact that they are, by their nature, normally on reasonably sized bodies of water, we see that allows them to have locally produced renewable energy as well, imported to their locations on a reasonably regular basis. Focusing down a little bit further, and just to really give a flavor of what is possible and what is being considered within one particular port. And you could replicate this. I know Rotterdam is the key port for Europe in terms of containers and other goods and services. But, you know, scale isn't everything within renewables. What is key is what is your access to offshore renewable energies and your ability to import new types of renewable-based fuels. And what we can see here, if you look at the diagram at the bottom, you can see the interconnectivity of Rotterdam, and that it's going to act as a future driver for the Netherlands hydrogen transition. And what that means in scale is just staggering. So by 2050, they're expecting to have something like 20 million tons of hydrogen produced and used in the Rotterdam area. What that requires is 200 gigawatts of renewable energy. Now, they're not saying that 200 gigawatts of renewables is available in the vicinity of Rotterdam. What they're saying is they need to have access to it. And that's a global transition. That means that they need to take renewables from areas that are beyond the normal catchment, where they can lay a cable or where they can lay a pipe. So what we're going to also look at beyond Rotterdam in terms of this interconnectivity is that this then spurs on other hydrogen applications. We look at local industry transition, and I think Stephen will cover how industry uses hydrogen in a green and sustainable way in the future. But we'll look at trucks, we'll look at heating, and we'll look at how that begins to marry into a hydrogen backbone that has been proposed in the Netherlands. We talked a little bit about this being a global transition. So what we're seeing is that hydrogen today could become the oil of tomorrow, let's say. We're using hydrogen as that energy carrier molecule to move energy from one region of the world to another, whether that region be the south of Europe towards the north, or whether it be Africa, the Middle East, Australia, to areas of high industry usage of energy. So we see countries like Japan building the first liquid hydrogen transporter ship, and for operating that ship between Australia and Japan to move energy from Australia into Japan, because they have a perfect storm occurring in Japan at the moment. They had a previous energy policy that was wedded towards nuclear. Obviously, given the recent history, that nuclear program has been curtailed and is being shut down. They need renewables to replace it, but they cannot produce all those renewables themselves. They need to import that energy again, just like we're seeing in Rotterdam. In terms of the applications, we're seeing hydrogen is not appropriate for all mobility applications. We see that with battery electric passenger vehicles beginning to move up their range capability. But for heavier vehicles, battery electric is not really feasible, because it impinges on the capacity or the capability of the vehicles to carry their payloads. So we're seeing hydrogen become a realistic alternative. And Hyundai have just imported into Europe via Rotterdam their first 10 hydrogen fuel cell electric 40-ton trucks. Those trucks are going to ply their trade in Switzerland. Rotterdam has a plan to work with various other manufacturers of trucks, including Toyota and a number of Dutch manufacturers, to install a project right the way through the northern territories of Europe, involving up to about 1,000 trucks. We see Daimler coming forward only a couple of weeks ago with a truck running on liquid hydrogen. And of course, we've got Nikola in the States and HAZEL in Europe also beginning to bring hydrogen trucks to the marketplace. Another application that is very key and central to some of Europe's activities in terms of moving goods away from ports and inland is inland shipping. And we're seeing significant change on major rivers, because they all wish to take advantage of these green solutions for mobility. And the barges that we see running up and down some of these rivers carrying these goods are all beginning to look at transitioning through to alternative fuels, and hydrogen is a key one in that transition. So we're seeing maybe up to 10 to 20 barges beginning to be moved onto hydrogen in the next 5 years, running from Rotterdam right the way through to Genoa. Each of these barges will use, just to get to places like Duisburg, up to 3 to 5 tons of hydrogen to complete a trip. So the amount of hydrogen per vessel, per unit, has increased dramatically, and that will push hydrogen into the mobility sphere even further. We're also, again, linked to ports, looking at significant maritime opportunities. These are really beginning to occur in terms of short sea shipping, so shipping that doesn't go, let's say, across the Atlantic, but runs in between European countries or in between parts of those European countries. So we're seeing ferries, we're seeing small cargo ships being considered for transition towards hydrogen. But we've even got designs of cruise ships and large cargo carriers already occurring in terms of hydrogen refits. What we find as well is that it may not only be hydrogen as the energy carrier that is used in some of these applications. We could see methanol or ammonia produced via green hydrogen, but then stored as the energy motive force for vessels such as these ships, or for ships that carry on or transition maybe the oceans of the world, let's say. And MAN are basically beginning to produce engines or investigate engines that would run directly on ammonia or methanol. So in summary, we're seeing electrolysis really scale up significantly. We're seeing renewable energy come to a shore near you, but it's not only the local renewables that we need to be aware of, it's a product that will be produced right the way around the world. We're seeing importing and exporting of hydrogen beginning. We're seeing that trade starting now, and we see that ports are the key focus of this particular area. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an insight into what a hydrogen future could look like. I know it's very quick, I know it's very short, and it's only covered a very discrete amount, but hopefully it gives you a little bit of an insight. Thanks very much.
Ian, thank you very much indeed. And as the title was Hydrogen Futures, and you've talked there 3 to 5 years for parts of Europe. How far away Ireland and the UK? Can you stay on camera?
Yeah, sorry,
Thanks.
I've come back, yeah. I think that the UK is a little bit further behind. We're looking in terms of, in the UK's perspective, we are considering what's called blue hydrogen. So we're looking at hydrogen that is produced via carbon capture. And that's not the wrong thing to do. It's just using the resources that we have available to bridge the gap to when the government and industry feel these other resources, the other renewable resources, will be available to us. But what I think is some of these other applications, the trucks, the maritime, they're going to be pan-European at the end of the day. So we're going to see those applications beginning to drive the needs for hydrogen, again, primarily via ports or transport hubs or industrial clusters. And I think Stephen will talk about these industrial clusters and how they will position themselves in the future using cleaner, sustainable hydrogen.
One of the questions is, Rotterdam is one of the largest marine logistics hub for Europe. Will it now become the largest green hydrogen hub for Europe as well?
I think it will take that claim to fame in the early days. And I think that the good burghers of Rotterdam wanted to try and capture that position for the next 50 years. Of course they do. But what you will see is that this type of transition can and will occur probably at every port. I mean, if we look at the UK, just in a UK perspective, there are 31 commercial ports around the UK. All of those will have some level of hydrogen activity. It may not be that they'll produce that hydrogen locally. It may be that they produce it, import it and store it. But one of the key elements that we're seeing here is how do you store the amount of hydrogen that is going to be required to run these scenarios going out into the future. That that technology probably exists today, but we haven't deployed it in the ways that are going to be required in the future.
Yes. Question from Kyle Flanagan also says, the Rotterdam model works well due to its proximity to offshore wind. How do we take advantage of our offshore generation, which is across the entire region?
Well, I think we can replicate what Rotterdam are doing. If you had a look at that map, they only had 2 gigawatts of offshore wind in that transition process. By 2050, they need 200 gigawatts of energy in some way, shape, or form. So this isn't something that's going to occur where everything gets, just because of its proximity to the nearest wind farm or the nearest solar farm. That's not what's going to happen here. What we're going to see is we're going to see energy move around the world, move around the using renewable energy installations that are placed in maybe areas that are more successful and more elongated in terms of producing those renewables. The ability to move the hydrogen, say as an ammonia molecule, that cuts the cost of distribution from one side of the globe to the other to be realistic in terms of its landed product cost in Europe. So that product that's produced, let's say in Africa, Central Africa, can actually be competitive with product that's produced 10 miles offshore of Rotterdam. And that's the key. It's about getting to that landed product, that delivered product cost that allows everybody to be competitive.
Excellent. And the final question before we move on to the next speaker, nice easy ones for you this morning, Ian, so hopefully you're up nice and get a good early breakfast. Is hydrogen an option for rail? Rotterdam has over 36 railway lines into the port at present.
Well, I didn't know it had 36 railway lines, so that's interesting information. Yes, in terms of rail, we're seeing transition already to hydrogen rail. In fact, there's a hydrogen train running around in the UK already. In Europe, there are projected to be 500 hydrogen trains running by 2030. Most of them will be small-scale commuter trains, but we're also seeing larger, heavier goods trains beginning to transition to hydrogen, and we're seeing the 2 main manufacturers, Siemens and Alstom, begin to produce their own hydrogen trains. And I think that just says that these solutions will be available right the way across Europe in a very short term.
I said the last question, but I will take, there's one further question coming in. It's a good one from Stephen Robinson. He says, where is the cutoff for size or scale to have an economically viable production site?
Well, I think that there's a lot of debate about that. And it really does go to local conditions. Because, I mean, I could look at a small island off the north of Scotland, which today has very high costs of fossil-based fuels, but has renewable resources right on its doorstep that could probably compete immediately with the cost of the imported fossil fuels. Whereas if I look in a refinery town, it would be a much more difficult analysis to create. So in terms of scale, I think what we see is the bigger scale obviously leads to lower pricing, no question. But these it shouldn't be perceived that it is all going to be top-down, a big top-down approach, because I think that communities themselves can take a significant control of their own sustainability transition, shall we say, and they can create their own energy structures locally so that they can bring in their own renewables into that energy mix. So I don't think that there is one size fits all. I think that the biggest will be the cheapest, but that doesn't mean to say that they're going to be the only ones out there.
Ian, many thanks for that. That's excellent. Thank you very much indeed.
Cheers, guys.
You get a quick cup of coffee before we come back to the questions and answers at the end.
Thank you very much.